Hey everyone, I'm Anso. You're in my design studio, and today we're working on a new knife model. Today we're gonna work on a new shop-built folding knife. The first folding knife that we introduced in the shop-built collection is the Aros. The Aros has basically been taking up most all my time for the last 9 months, give or take. And finally now, with the new team member, we had some changes in the setup over there. Everything is falling into place. Production is smooth running, if there's such a thing. I actually have found a little more time for myself. I was finding that my days were getting somewhat scattered, and by the end of the day I had some kind of mess in the way that I was working. I was just scattered all around the place. I felt a need to restructure my day. I also felt a need to seek back to my roots. One of the good old sayings is that urgent screams and important whispers. And the most important job that I can do is doing design work. Design work is what sets the direction of my work, of the company's work, and I need to be 1 step ahead or 10 steps ahead all the time. And looking back, I haven't been that. Often I will see myself needing a new design yesterday. And that's really not ideal. Designs need time to develop. I need time to simmer. I need time to just figure out what is it that we need and why. So with the Aros in a very good place right now, I also started looking at really a product roadmap. Sounds super boring, but when you run a company like Anso of Denmark, you actually need to plan ahead several months. So Karina and I sat down for a full day and did a lot of work in that regard. And one of the things that we touched up on was my desire and need to do more design work. So we discussed how is that going to be possible. One of the things that we did was, well, I go to my studio 30 minutes earlier than I usually do. I start the day by doing design work. I sit down at my vintage French drawing table that I got when I started in the School of Architecture. I arrange myself in a much better way. I have everything I need, the tools of the trades, my favorite pen, pencils, different rulers, French curves, my brand new light table. How could I work professional in knife making for 25 years without a light table? I have no idea. I've worked so much in CAD, so getting back to hand sketching, which has been almost like a New Year's resolution for me. And we're in the end of June by now, so sometimes things take time. But I have everything around me that I need and nothing else. This table used to just be a huge clutter of cameras, knives, boxes, stuff that I didn't have anywhere else to place. But now I arranged myself with a working area that doesn't change. I can sit down and work, leave it for the next day, and I don't have to go find my tools. So this has been such an important factor for me, and it's only been about a week's time, but every single day for that past week I sat down at 7:30 and worked for an hour and a half just doing hand sketching and working on this new design. What actually came as a surprise, this has moved much further into the effect in that it creates a much better structure of my day. I stop my workday around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and I actually feel much more satisfaction of the work that I got done because I got a great start to the day. I don't check emails, I don't check social media, I don't even say hello to the team until I've been sitting down for an hour and 30 minutes doing what I love the most, and that is design work. So today we are looking at a new shop build project. It's a folding knife. The Aros was the first shop build folder. The Anso sheepswood was the first shop build project in our shop. The Aros has become my favorite carry. It's, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, everyday carry folder out there right now, but I want to top that. And how can you top a success? Well, the Aros came to a conclusion of several years thinking about a design. Actually not working on a design, but thinking about a design. I wanted to design a sub 3-inch folder that would be great for everyday carry. Often size has a big factor if you will carry a knife or if you won't. That said, I have a sweet spot for 3 3/4 inch folders. This is the Orso, and that's right around that size. Maybe this is 3-inch. The Neo, maybe that's 3.5, but somewhere in between is a sweet spot for me. And I also think that an everyday carry folder will, in some instances, need a little more blade than the Aros offers, and that's why I'm working on this project now. I've had this thought about the design for a while. I had the mental image of the design. It's kind of like when you wake up from a dream, you have kind of an idea what went on, but not quite being able to grasp it. And that's kind of the way that I work with design quite often. I will stand in the shower and think about a design, and I have this general idea or some of the aspects of the design. So one of the things that I wanted was larger folder with a kind of straight back to the blade. That was the base for me starting to sketch out. So what I did was sit for those hour and a half and just start putting something on paper. And this was actually the first drawing that I did about a week ago, working on this new design. If you look back through some of the previous episodes on this channel, you'll find projects like the Sonic. It started out with a speed sketch session with me just doing as many sketches as possibly could within 15 minutes, and that everything turned into the Sonic. What episode are we on now with the Sonic?
4 or 5.
4 or 5, yeah. So that process was all documented on camera. I found that extremely interesting. The Aros was somewhat different, but still a little in the same direction. I sketched out the first sketch for this in a bar in Manhattan. We don't need another clip of me sketching in a restaurant in Manhattan, because you've seen that clip quite a bit. But that's actually how I work. I will bring my sketchbook, and suddenly that idea will materialize itself into something a little more graspy, something that I can actually put on paper. Other times it requires 100 sketches or 50 sketches before I get anywhere with this new design, and I actually have a name for it.
Already?
Already, because I like changing things up.
Okay, right on.
You'll get that later. Sitting at my light table, I started sketching out. And what I did was just starting out with some quick sketches, just feeling my way around this idea, trying to grasp hold of something, trying to find the size of it. So this is the result of that first sketching session. Are you ready, Anders?
I'm ready. I'm absolutely ready.
So different tempo, hour and a half worth of sketching here. Total of 9 sketches.
What?
Some of it is garbage, but every single one of them led to that next one. Every single sketch, I learned something. I found this was one of the first sketches that there's tons of things going on here that I love. It's too big. This is 3.5, 3 3/4 inch, give or take. I love everything about this sketch here. I could see myself continuing working on this sketch later on. but that was not the objective of this sketch session. This was to get very close to something that I could continue working on for that next everyday carry folder in my shop build collection. So I worked my way and ended that sketching session with this sketch here. And I'm actually getting somewhere. I actually feel I got super close to something that I could use on the next day's sketch session. So what I did here was just freehand sketching. I didn't actually use the light table other as a working surface, but this sketch changed everything.
Why?
Because the next day I actually traced this drawing onto the sketches and then used all the work that I did the day before, reused some of the lines, redrew the design. We'll get to that.
All right.
So this was the first day of sketching. I actually left the drawing table that day feeling a little drunk, a little happy, a little crazy, woo! But this probably doesn't make sense to you, but I felt that I had a breakthrough, and that was only after an hour and 30 minutes of sketching, using a completely different routine for my day, or what would become a routine. But I actually knew right there, I was onto something. This was the perfect way for me to work. I had sun in my face. I was doing it, the exact thing that I love the most about my work. I was drawing. I actually like to say when people ask me, so how are you doing? And very often people will respond, good, I'm super busy. I don't consider busy as a positive thing, really. Busy in a business is usually good. That means that you're making money. Well, busy for me means that I'm probably stressed out and I'm just running from A to B and not being super efficient. I'm actually changing the way that I think. So when people ask me, how are you doing? I started to say, I'm good, I feel inspired. I can tell you one thing, leaving that drawing table that morning, I was so inspired and I couldn't wait for that next day. I wanted to sit at that drawing table for the full day. My schedule didn't allow for that, but I was so looking forward to the next day, and it was only 9:30. This is where we left the design the day previously. And now is when the light table really comes into its perfect use, and that's to trace your sketches over and over and again. And that's what I did. This was the sketch from the day before. I put a piece of paper on top of it and then started tracing that same design, but just changing the way I work just a little bit, either just by chance or because I could see what happens if I do this. So one sketch is not exactly like the other. That's one of the interesting things about working so much by hand, is that just shaking your hand a little bit will change a line, and that might reveal a detail or a curve that you didn't see before. Another thing is that sketching by hand leaves so much up to the viewer's interpretation of the drawing. So I might see something that you don't see, you might see something that I don't see, but in a CAD drawing, what you see is what you get. And that is one of the reasons why I needed and I wanted to do much more hand sketching. One of the reasons I have this handy is I would circle in the pivot screw, the button. This will be a button lock. I am following in the steps of the Aras, creating another button lock, just a little larger. Just that little touch of precision in a otherwise really rough sketch lifts the sketch up to a different level, and you can more clearly understand what's going on in this area here. I am not overly focused on the position of the pivot. I'm not overly focused on the position of the button lock. This is more to give me an idea what's going on here. So the final location will be tweaked, and usually that's in CAD. But it's mainly here for me to understand what's going on. I will use the French curve to touch up a part. Often it's the edge of the blade that will need just a little harder line. And that's one of the things why I love the Pilot BP-Matic, is that it works quite a bit like a pencil. You can have a soft line, but if you press harder, you will have a much harder line. So it works quite a bit like the pencil. Why don't I use a pencil? Well, one thing is, I've told this before, but erasers are illegal in my process of sketching. They are nowhere to be found here. I want to document every single step of my process, and I can only do that if I draw with a permanent tool. So there's no erasing. If I do something by mistake, if I draw a line by mistake, it's there. Maybe I will hide it by doing some shading. I also use shading just as a way to pass time while I'm thinking about the sketch, and it will lift the sketch up just a little bit. It will give some 3-dimension to an otherwise flat drawing. But again, the most important reason for me to use a pen while sketching is it forces me to save the process. I tend to be a little more careful when I draw with a pencil because I want it to be perfect, and I know that I can just erase the lines until it's perfect. You can't do that with this. Using a pen actually gives me a much more free sketching process because I know that whatever I put on paper will stay there. I don't really worry much about it. I just move on to the next sketch. I had this one sketch directly traced from the sketch from the day before. So I thought, here, this looks quite well, but what if the handle was a little more organic shaped? So I drew in a little more curves here and there, and looking and comparing, nah, that wasn't what I was after for this project. Then I actually used this drawing from today, or from that day, to trace the next drawing. And I'm really just making the same knife once more. Maybe I straighten out a line a little bit, maybe I will broaden the design. I had an idea about a detail for the backspacer. I drew that in. I wasn't all over the thought about making a more organic handle. Still, I love this sketch, it's just not what I'm after for this project. So I might return to this sketch later on. I considered my German customers that one-hand open knives are not legal to carry, so should I consider making a knife also that would incorporate a nail nick if needed? I often just put notes down on my drawings just to remember a thought process. But the most important thing is everything is documented. All my ideas are put on paper and I save these for later. The process for the past week has basically been the same. I've been sketching the same knife over and over again, just tweaking here and there, sketching again, tweaking, sketching again. And the light table has really been a joy to use for that. And it reminds me in some way about the way that I've been working in CAD for the past 25 years, because I will draw a design, copy it, change a little bit, copy it, change a little bit. So in the end, I will have almost like a piece of paper in CAD with maybe 50, 100, 150 small variations, and I can trace back my process all the way back to that first version of my idea. But what I found was that drawing the same design again and again, and I started seeing some of the things that was important for me in the design, and I started to see resemblance to something that seemed familiar. And I was like, why is this so familiar to me? And then I started looking at actually the Sonic, the Isola, and even the Aras. And while we add it, let's add the Orso and the Neo. And I love when I can see a familiarity in my designs going from details to details. But you might actually see it a little more obvious with the shape of the front of the handle here. Kind of The blade shape, although different between these three, you can see the familiarity between them. Something that I've been pretty much incorporating in most every single sketch that I've been doing for the past few years is I put a hump in my handle, in the back of the handle here.
Why have you done that?
You know, you have a curve in the palm of your hand, and that dent will fit in the middle of your hand, and that has just become kind of, I wouldn't say a trademark of how I design my knives, but at least it's part of the way that I see into a design. Even the Aros has this kind of kink to the back here, and it just resonates really well with me. That's another thing, working by hand and just tracing leaves time to resonate, leaves time to think about it. I'm actually being quite purposeful when I sketch out or trace out the design again and again and again. It's almost like I get to know the design better by working in this fashion, where CAD is so fast, it's on the screen. Maybe if you forget to turn off notifications on your email, you get distracted. It's very easy to just open a browser and check the news or whatever. Here, and I'm confined to this space, music in the background. It's almost meditative to sit and draw here, and I love that process. I like when I realize that I'm actually drawing inspiration from past work, and I saw that happening while working on the sketch. Let's dive a little deeper into this sketch, and I'll let you in on some of the details that I keep working on. You might not see it when I'm just showing these sketches, so I'll show you. So we have a somewhat curved line, but almost straight line going from the hump in the handle to the point of the knife. That's super important. This slightly curved line here, that's important. This choil on the blade, super important for me. And I'm still debating how I will incorporate the flipper tab. This will be a flipper. How do I incorporate the design of the flipper tab with this choil? So if you see here, the line of the handle here follows into the choil. That's a super important detail for me right now. The front of the handle here, almost like your guard stop, matches the line of the edge. That's some of the aspects that I continue to put in sketch after sketch after sketch. Then I might do variation of the width of the handle, the length, details around the lanyard. I haven't gone as far yet. I tried doing like a super crisp drawing here, actually using a ruler, just getting things much more straight and less curved. I didn't like that, but now I've tested it. Testing an idea by sketching is also super important. And again, this concluded that day of sketching. A little less sketches than the day before, 7 sketches total, and all within the same direction of the design. I really enjoy that process.
Why did you enjoy that process, Jens?
Because I was feeling I was getting somewhere. I was getting so close to a design, and I had much more connection with the design because I've been sketching that same design 7 times with only small variation. But I could see that already on day 2 I was getting huge progress, and because of the light table I was getting quite exact sketches from step to step. Whereas I sat down this past weekend, I was in Copenhagen with Karina, and I went to a museum, and after browsing around I sat in the garden in a small shed because it was raining a little, and then I started sketching with the same idea in mind, but completely different because I couldn't quite remember how it looked and I was doing it completely freehand, but it still had some of the tastes of this. But these are so rough. These are 30-second sketches or 1-minute sketches, but it was enough to just in that moment document whatever I had in my mind right then after having browsed mid-century furniture design. The design I visited is the Danish Design Museum in Copenhagen. I can only recommend that. It's beautiful. They have one of the most important collection of Japanese super sword fittings. Beautiful. They have a super extensive collection of Danish designed chairs. I love that. And then if you can imagine everything in between those two very broad areas of design. So I came out of that museum feeling super inspired, and I just had to sit down with my sketchbook. Did I feel super inspired to draw? Not necessarily, but I had some thoughts that came down on paper at least. Day 3 of sketching on this project, I did the exact same thing. I traced yesterday's work. Didn't do much change. I did a little wider design here, but just drawing the same design over and over, I started to know it. I even switched the drawing around, drawing the clip side, adding what I've considered as a clip for this knife. Super fast tracing, but I'm starting to be familiar with the design. I add a little tracing. Actually, I knew right here that the way that we're going to make this knife will be the same way that right now we are doing a lot of testing on the Aros, where we change from a flat milled blade to a hollow ground blade. That's something that we were going to deep dive in a later episode. But I knew that this technique will be used on this design here. So again, just a little bit of guidance with the French curve allowed me to make a much tighter sketch. So I found an area here that would have more or less a radius, and at least I simulated in my sketch how the grind would look like in the finished knife. And it gives a much more exact sketch, and it tells me a lot more than completely freehanding it. But just those small steps will lift the sketch up to a much higher level, in my opinion at least. The same with the clip. I just traced the clip. This is the isola clip, and I just traced that into place. So I crushed it a little bit by just tracing the clip, and I can see, well, this clip actually works fantastic on this design as well. Excellent. So I've already one step ahead now in that process. Often clips are an afterthought for a lot of knives. It's quite obvious when you look at knives out there that clips are often either because this is the clip this company uses, or an afterthought, and oh yeah, we need to put a clip on it. But actually adding the clip so early in the stage, it's very satisfactory. What I learned after this third day of sketching was that I was both getting super close to the final result, but I also needed to reaffirm that this was the right direction. So I started adding some other different details. Does this work? Not really. I kind of made a groove that would fit the two front fingers here. Didn't really like that. I completely freehand sketched the design again, just changing dimension a little bit. I actually really like this sketch for a different project, but it has a little more pointy blade shape, a little more narrow handle. I really like it, but I still like this more for this project. But again, I have documented my process. So at any time tomorrow, in a week, in a year, in 10 years, I can go back, look at this drawing, and if I still like it, I can trace this and start working on a new design based on this sketch here. By the end of this day's sketching session, I realized I wasn't really taking new steps. I was a little bit confined within this. Confined might be the wrong word, but I felt that I couldn't take that next step. I felt that I have gotten so far in the process with that day's work, but now something else had to happen. And that something else was actually getting the dimensions right. And that requires CAD work. That also requires, and that's where it becomes interesting, that requires that I named the knife, because I didn't want my CAD drawing to be new shop built knife 2 version 1.0. And I know that the team would just hate me for making a folder on Dropbox that says, this is the new project that you should work on. It's working title shop build or SB2 or something stupid like that. So I actually spent a little time in the evening naming this.
What?
And I actually did that before sketching it out in CAD. So please welcome the Toko.
The Toko?
T-O-K-O.
What? Where's that from?
I actually have no idea. I love short names that contains the letter O. And I have a list on my phone where I put notes down with potential knife names. And maybe it was in there, maybe it just came. I don't exactly recall, but what I do recall is that then I started looking, because you can't just name a knife whatever and then you come out with it and then you realize that company A, B, and C has a knife with the same name. So you have to be somewhat original when you're naming knives. Incidentally, when Googling the word, I found it had a meaning in Japanese. And by now you probably know that I have a huge fascination for the Japanese culture, the Japanese craftsmanship. So Japanese meaning in the name is everlasting.
Ooh.
I found that to be quite compelling for a name for a knife. Not the reason why I chose it, but it certainly didn't hurt anybody. So this is the Toko. And then I snapped a picture on my phone of this sketch here. I traced it in Rhino, which is my favorite, at least current favorite CAD program. I've been using that since School of Architecture, so well over 25 years by now. I'm pretty much as fluent in Rhino as I am in sketching by hand. So I don't really judge much between these two processes. This is just different. But what I found was, since I had been working so much on the design by hand, tracing it and then getting the dimensions to work was so easy and fast. I think I spent no more than 10 minutes in CAD getting from this sketch to this CAD drawing here. And that was an eye-opener for sure. All the time I spent working on the hand drawings saved me a ton of time messing around with it in CAD. So it's still not done, but this is a CAD representation of the Toko. Is the dimensions right? I'm not quite sure yet. Should the design be a little wider? Maybe so. And that would be very fast to do that in CAD, but I actually went ahead and continued my tracing. So I traced a CAD drawing on my light table, which is completely crazy and silly and whatever else you would call it. Now we are at present day. This is the last sketch I did on this project. This is traced from the CAD drawing. Basically the only thing that I did going from the previous day's sketch to the CAD drawing was I lengthened the handle just a little bit and then started tracing again. Now it's basically the same knife, but I still needed to learn about it. I need to get familiar with it. It's really, really different process for me with this project, and I love it. It's almost spiritual or intuitive way of working with the design. I haven't done that before, and I love that. I really, really love that. What I did was I traced the design. The middle one here is a little wider. Does it get a little clunky? I think it does. This one has a little more soul to it. Before I forget, I had a thought about why I was doing this. And of course you should know as well. As I said before, this drawing here, the CAD drawing, that is a very strict drawing. There's no room for interpretation. This is what you get. There's no other way to interpret this than what you see. But the moment that you have a softer line by using the pen, you add a little shading. Now you can return to interpreting the design. And that's super important for me for the next step. So the small details, the feeling of the knife. When I design a knife, even though it's on paper, I'm feeling it in my hand. I'm using it. I'm 10 steps ahead of this sketch. I have the finished knife in my hand. Do I like it? Is it too round? Is it too thick? Is it too wide? That's thoughts that goes through my head while I'm still on paper. I don't need a 3D print to see that. I can just see it from the drawing. So having room to interpret that drawing is super important. I put notes down on the paper for things that I need to consider in the next design session, and you'll be joining me on that, by the way. And I actually think this is a really good place to stop the process for today. I really hope you enjoyed episode 1 of creating Toko, the new shop-built Anso project. This is to be out in 2024.
What?
And we are in late June. How about that? And I did this drawing yesterday. So don't say that we don't move fast here at Anso of Denmark, because we do. But still a little ways out. So if you want, check out the Aros project now, the shop build folder, number 1, the best everyday carry folder that you will see, at least so far in 2024. It's available for pre-order. In my site, there's a link below. Get your Aros today. Follow me in the next episode of Creating the Toko. That will be out probably in 2 weeks after you see this. Until next time, see you later.